Lake County, Florida, and welcome to Around the House, sponsored by Romac Lumber and Supply. I'm your host, Don Magruder, and you're listening to my 790 AM WLBE in beautiful Leesburg, Florida. Or if you're seeing us today, then you're watching LSTV, Lake Sumter Television, and Appleseed Marketing. Since the beginning of the Great Recession in 2007-2008, Lake County's economy has struggled. A collapse in home values, record levels of foreclosures, business closures, job losses, and little economic growth has taken a massive toll on the budget for Lake County. The lack of economic growth, coupled with the county's inability to manage its finances, has depleted reserves, and in August, the County Commission voted to increase property tax millage rates by a whopping 18%. Today is a special Around the House with District 4 Lake County Commissioner Leslie Campione, who was the only commissioner to vote against this outrageous tax increase. In fairness, we have reached out to the other county commissioners, Jimmy Connor, Welton Cadwell, Sean Parks, and Tim Sullivan. We've asked them on numerous occasions to participate with us in today's show, but none of them accepted our invitation. The other big issue that's going on here in Lake County is the big change in garbage, which is going to happen October 6th. Many believe the changes are not good, and we'll let you decide. Leslie Campione also didn't support the change in garbage services, and she will probably be able to shed some light on that. So with that, I'd like to introduce District 4 County Commissioner Leslie Campione. Hello, Commissioner Campione. We are so pleased that you have decided to accept our invitation, because these are big issues that need to be discussed, and thank you once again for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be able to participate today, and I'm hoping that as a result of reaching out to taxpayers and residents in Lake County, that we can convince a few other commissioners that this is absolutely the wrong thing to do, the wrong time, and we just need to tighten up our belts, and we need to get through these economic hard times in Lake County, because we're not out of the woods, and you know that, and you've talked about that already. So it's great to be here today.
And I think that's the most important thing. This economy is far from settled. Real people on the ground, the seniors, working people, the working poor, they really know that this economy has a long way to go before it's rebounded. And once again, thank you for being here. Commissioner Campione, before we get going, why don't you just take a moment and talk a little bit about your background, how long you've been on the commission, and then we'll get into the issues at hand.
Sure. I've been in Lake County since 1971, thanks to my mom and dad, who moved to Lake County from Orlando. And I graduated from Eustis High School. I went up to Greenville, South Carolina to attend Furman University, where I received my degree. And then I came back to Florida, to the University of Florida, where I received a law degree. I then left, went to Atlanta, worked in a big firm, did municipal finance work and public policy work, and then came back to Lake County when I started my family, because I knew this was a great place to grow up and to raise a family. So for about 23 years I've been practicing law. My focus is in business. I've also served as a city attorney in 3 of the cities in Lake County, and I do a lot of real property law, dispute resolution, real estate transactions. So I have a really good feel of the economy in Lake County and the people who work in Lake County. I work with businesses, so I consider myself more of a business attorney. I'm not a litigation attorney, and of course, you know, having my own practice, I know what it's like to run a business, make payroll, and make some of those tough decisions you have to make when you're operating a business.
And there's no doubt about it, when there's issues come up before the commission on land issues or zoning issues, you're the most competent person on the board, and possibly you're probably the most competent person, I think, to talk about property taxes.
Well, I appreciate that, Don. I have to say thank you. I mean, that's a very nice thing for you to say. I do think that we've got a strong county commission. We've got 4 good county commissioners. In addition to me, I think that we put a lot of thought into the decisions that we make. This is just one of those areas where we happen to disagree, and quite frankly, we disagree I do very vehemently with the position that's been taken thus far by the rest of the commission.
You know that today's discussion is about an 18% property tax millage rate increase that was approved in July by the County Commission. and I understand you were the only one to vote against it, but the increase has not been finalized.
Correct.
It hasn't been finalized. Now, some say that this is a ploy to say 18%, and then we're going to feel better and get you for 6%. Others believe that it's legit. Take a few moments and tell us why you voted against this. And is this a ploy, you think?
Well, I would expect that we'll see that number decreased. It's just a question of how far they will bring it down. I would hope that maybe after we have further discussion tomorrow at our board meeting, that we might win a few more commissioners over to the idea that we don't need this increase and that this increase is really bad for our economy, it's bad for our residents. But you asked specifically about the actual rate that was adopted. Extremely high, and it was based upon a assertion that there was a $15 million shortfall. And what I want to get across to the listeners and the viewers is that that is $15 million of new spending.
Right.
So we heard a lot of sort of doomsday scenarios that, well, if you don't vote for this increase, we're going to have to close our libraries, we're not going to be able to fund basic services. Well, the truth is that we can fund all of our services at the same level as last year without increasing our millage rate. So that's such an important part of this equation. So then you have to start asking the question, well, why would they adopt such a high rate? And I think that's where the idea started floating around, well, maybe they put it really high like that because they intended to bring it down, and then they could claim that they were heroes, they reduced it, they listened to the people. My assertion is that it should be zero, no increase, no millage rate increase. We're already feeling an increase on our tax bill just because most of us saw our values go up.
And that's an important point. Lake County is getting somewhere around 4% more in revenues or taxes because there's been a very slight and modest increase in home values. So it's not like they're getting the same amount as last year. They're getting considerably more money on that, correct?
Right, Don, you make a good point. It's not just an increase in home values, it's actually new value added to the tax roll. So you have a combination of people's values being reassessed and going up, and then you also have new buildings, new improvements that have come on the tax bill. And in talking to the property appraiser, that's the majority of what we have seen. It is the bulk of it is new value added, and then an increase, a slight increase in our values.
And then this is a very key point. With every new home that's built, or every new business that is built in Lake County, you're seeing the taxable value of that piece of property go up about 10 times, I understand. That's the general figure. For example, a lot that the county was getting $300 taxes on, if they put a house on it, goes all of a sudden to $4,000 or $3,500. So you're seeing a lot of that growth. So it really makes this property tax discussion a little more disappointing that they're asking for that high millage rate increase on top of it. The other thing that was brought up in a meeting the other day I saw you in was the lack of budget workshops you had this year. Now, Commissioner Jimmy Connor is the new chairman. He controls the workshops. But I'm told that you only had one budget workshop this year prior to the announcement of this 18%. And I know you've got to be kinder, but it almost seems like the commissioners and the people of Lake County were Pearl Harbored on this. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, we had a budget workshop in January, and at that time we were given a presentation that showed keeping all of our spending exactly the same, funding services at the exact same level as the prior year, and that is where we were shown about $4.3 million of a shortfall. Now that shortfall is not really a shortfall because you have the opportunity to use infrastructure sales tax money to pay debt service on the existing judicial building that has already been constructed. And so in essence, it's really not a shortfall, but it was shown that way because in years past they didn't use that sales tax money for that purpose necessarily. They did a little bit last year. So what happened was we didn't have another workshop until June, and at that point we saw this 18.6% increase unveiled. And that's very problematic, because if you know that you're going in that direction, then it is up to the chairman to call those meetings and have those discussions and those difficult, discussions about, well, is this absolutely necessary? What can we do to avoid this? And
well, let's just ask this question. You were chairman of the county commission prior years, just last year and prior.
Right.
How many budget workshops did you have?
Well, we started having our budget workshops right after we adopted a budget. We started it on the next budget, because I knew that it was going to be difficult to keep our millage rate the same.
Did you have more than one budget?
Oh, absolutely. We had multiple workshops. It was an important thing to do, essentially to ask each department to come in and take a look at their budget from the year before and find ways to cut. And we made significant cuts over the last 2 years.
So some of this you're talking about is a failure of leadership by Commissioner Connor.
Well, I'm not going to go there. I'm disappointed that there wasn't more attention to having those workshops, having those discussions, airing all of this in the public, so that the public could get more involved earlier on. And instead, what we had happen was it kind of hit the public all at one time, and then they get their trim notices, and everybody is, I've gotten several emails where people described it as, I just fell out of my seat. I just opened up my trim notice. That's a problem, and I'm just very sorry that that is the direction that this process went in.
And unfortunately, because of this failure of leadership, we're having groups pit against one another. You're having people who are worried about the library and the sheriff's offices and this pit against one another instead of a commonality achieved. Have you noticed that it seems to have heightened up? First off, it seems like everybody's hitting the emergency button.
Right. And this is not how you make big decisions. You don't do this type of thing in the 11th hour. And I'm a positive person, Don.
Yep.
I like to get along with everybody, and I know that we all have downsides, and we all have weaknesses, and we all have strengths. And I like to focus on the strengths of my colleagues and others that I work with. But in this particular instance, I have to say that we really needed to have more workshops. We needed to have more opportunities to discuss this, but for whatever reason, it was decided to kind of keep this out of the public eye until June, when this whopping 18.6% increase came out into the public domain. And that's extremely problematic. And the fact that we have different groups that are speaking up, I am just glad to see that we have this kind of participation, and that we do have the Chamber of Commerce is speaking out. The Lake 100 group, held their forum the other day, and we have a meeting tomorrow, the Board of County Commissioners, at 9 o'clock, and this will be a topic of discussion. And then we will have the actual hearings on September the 9th, and
September 23rd.
September 23rd will be those two hearings that are at 5 o'clock.
5:05. You're listening to Around the House, sponsored by Romac Lumber. Our special guest is Leslie Campione. She's District 4 County Commissioner for Lake County. We're talking about a very important subject today, property tax, and we're going to get into the garbage thing a little later. This segment of Around the House is sponsored by Burke's Barbecue, located at 311 County Road 466A in Fruitland Park. Now, everyone knows Burke's has some great smoked barbecue and the best fixings in Lake County, but they're now doing breakfast. Burke's has great southern breakfast, and they offer a $1 homemade sausage biscuit early bird special that's from 6:30 to 7:30 a.m. Yes, you can get a homemade sausage biscuit, and I'm sure Commissioner Campione with all these meetings could use some of that. Burke's is located on 466A by the big American flag next to Colony Palazzo. At least we're talking about food. That's the most important thing. Let's talk a little bit about millage rates. A lot of people glaze over when they talk about millage rate and property tax. Give us your best description of what a millage rate is and how it affects property taxes.
Well, essentially, a millage rate is based on a dollar tax on every $1,000 of value that you own. Mm-hmm. So let's say 20 mills on $100,000 is a $2,000 tax bill. And the way that we do it in Lake County and in Sumter County would be similar, is that you will have those first line items on your estimated tax bill that will show the county commission millages. Okay, and then you will move on down, and in the county commission millage, it's important for everyone to know this too. The county commission adopts the millage rate that takes care of funding the other constitutional officers, so the tax collector, the property appraiser, the supervisor of elections, the clerk of court, some judicial support for our state attorney and public defender, but that's through the clerk's office, and then we also have the sheriff. So that's the county commission budget. Then you're going to go a little bit further down on that tax bill, and you're going to see the millage for the school district. You're going to see a millage for the...
And that's set by the state.
That's set by the state and by the school board. They have two parts. One is established by the state, one is established by the school district. And then you'll have the Water Management District on there. You will have the Lake County Water Authority. And ultimately, you will get down to the bottom, and you will have in our case, in North Lake County, the North Lake Hospital District. And
Leslie, I put millage rates where I look at filling the car up with gasoline. Millage rates is the amount per gallon, the amount that you put in the car or the gasoline tank is the price of the house. So if you compare your house value as a gas tank and how much you're going to pay per gallon, that determines how much your property tax bill. I know that's sort of rudimentary. I'm not as smart as you, but that direct 18% millage rate increase directly affects you and real home values, doesn't it?
It does, but there is one, I mean, I like your analogy, Don, but there's one little change that I would bring out, and that is that your gas tank is always the same capacity.
Yes.
Right.
You don't get to add more to it.
Right. But in the case of property taxes, as your value goes up, it's kind of like your gas tank gets even bigger.
And some of the discussion during this whole talk about this millage rate increase is that the county commission has little insight or little control over the constitutional officer's budget, including the sheriff's department. And I know that there are people who say those budgets need to be reviewed closer. I know that puts you in a difficult position, but at this point, don't you believe all budgets need to be looked at very closely? Tell me if I'm wrong. The last thing that should ever be done is raising the property taxes of the people who are suffering the most.
Absolutely. It's a huge decision to make, and it's a terrible thing to do in an economy such as ours that is so fragile. So, you know, we've got two impacts happening. One that is directly impacting people who are on fixed incomes, trying to run a business, and they're getting hit at a time when they're having difficulty making ends meet. The other is that overall impact on our economy. You're essentially taking $15 million out of the private sector to put it over on the government side. And we can't afford to do that right now in Lake County. We need to leave that money in the private sector. So I do think that it's important that as a county commission we have these difficult discussions about how each of our constitutional officers are funded, and I think that that's an important part of the taxpayers feeling confident that we're making the right decisions. There needs to be a level of transparency where everyone feels that they can look at how the money is being spent and that it's being spent in a way that is the most efficient way to spend the money, that they're getting the best value for their tax dollars.
Well, you know, since you've been on the commission, I understand that a major part of your focus is attracting new business and industry to Lake County. Most people felt for years Lake County was somewhat anti-business, anti-growth. Since the Great Recession, there's been a lot of focus by Lake County, yourself in particular, to grow the county. What does an 18% millage rate increase send to the people you're trying to attract to do business here in Lake County? I can't see how that's, first off, isn't growth really what we need to, growth and economic growth and businesses, isn't that what the county really needs to solve most of these issues?
Well, I've put my heart and soul into economic development for the last almost 4 years, because I truly believe that that is in Lake County, one of the things that we can be doing for long-term sustainability of our economy is to diversify our economy in Lake County. And I have tried so hard to put that image out there along with my fellow commissioners. We made a lot of great decisions and we've done a lot of good things to attract new business to Lake County. And so I guess that's why it's so hard for me to understand why a decision would be made to have an increase this high and quite frankly an increase at all. Because we want companies to see Lake County as the place they want to come to do business. If they're looking at Central Florida and they have a choice of going to Seminole, Osceola, Polk, even Sumter, we want them here in Lake County. So I just think that this is exactly the wrong message you want to send when you're trying to get the word out that you want companies to come and locate in your county.
So do you think that this increase may have severely damaged our ability to attract new industries and business?
Well, I hope that I hope that's not the case. I truly hope that's not the case. It's just very frightening to look at how that has affected other areas when they raise their taxes, they raise their fees. When those things happen, you typically see a decline in new businesses coming into those areas.
Well, the thing I think that has to be considered, before the Great Recession, business was booming. There was more tax revenues coming to the county than any point in history. Since the Great Recession, home values have collapsed 40 to 60%, and for most people, they still remain anywhere 40 to 50% below where they should be. Additionally, unemployment has gone up the last 2 months, and unemployment is still 2.5 times worse than it was before the Great Recession. Do you worry that these tax increases will cost jobs here in Lake County?
Absolutely. I mean, I know in talking to business owners, some of our business owners in Lake County are going to get hit anywhere from $30,000 to $70,000 in new taxes. You're talking about several jobs or things they might have done to put money back into their businesses. So there's no question that it will have that type of in effect. It's just how do we come back from it, and maybe between now and these September meetings we see some changes, some movement on our county commission. I know you mentioned earlier that when things were booming and there was a lot of money coming into county government, the county government size grew exponentially. Right. Since that time, there have been a lot of cuts that have been made to the workforce itself on the county government side. And so there have been, in conjunction with using some of the reserves that built up, there were cuts that were being made. So I think there is a misperception out there that this was a result of not making any cuts, living off of reserves, and boom, one day we woke up and this hit us. Absolutely not. My position is that we can ride out the storm. We've been riding out the storm another year, and we're going to see revenues and expenses line up very closely. And we need to have some good discussions, some honest discussions where people are able to be very honest, open, and frank about, are there ways in Lake County we can do things more efficiently, get the best value for our dollar, and keep our taxes low and protect this very fragile economy.
But you know, one thing concerns me, there's always a discussion about the cuts that government has made, and they're severe. No one doubts that. But there's a new study came out by the Conference of Mayors that says most private wages have reduced 23% since the Great Recession started. Many people are working a lot more for less, and there are thousands of people in Lake County who do not have a job. And it's hard to balance the shared sacrifice. Now, ideally, no one wants anyone to sacrifice, and we want good times for all, but how do you rationalize taxing people who are struggling to pay their own bills, put food on the table, to justify raises and more spending for county people? That's really the issue.
It can't be rationalized, and that's why I think that what we've heard a lot of sort of gloom and doom type scenarios that we're going to have to close this, close that, to try to generate support for a tax increase. And unfortunately, we don't need to go there. We do not need to increase the taxes in Lake County.
We're having a great conversation with Commissioner Leslie Campione from Lake County, and we're talking about property taxes. We're going to soon start talking about garbage. Stay tuned, and we've got a lot more to discuss. Welcome back to Around the House, sponsored by Romac Lumber. I'm your host, Don Magruder, and you're listening to my 790 AM WLBE in beautiful Leesburg, Florida. And if you're watching us today, you're watching us on LSTV, Lake Sumter Television, and Appleseed Marketing. And we have a great guest today. We have District 4 County Commissioner Leslie Campione. We're talking about property taxes. We're going to also talk about garbage a little bit later on. And Commissioner Campione voted against an 18% millage rate increase earlier in the summer, and we're trying to talk about it and how you rationalize it. I don't think we've come up with a way of rationalizing it yet, but Commissioner Campione, let me sort of throw out what's happening in Sumter County, and I don't want to speak for the Sumter County Board of County Commissioners, but they've tentatively set their 2014-2015 millage rate at $5.90 per mill, which is below their rollback rate and last year's rate also. They're lower in taxes. So their millage rate in Sumter County versus Lake County could be 20% less this year. Now, the Sumter County budget officials said in their budget summary, the reason why they're able to cut property tax millage rates, and I'm going to quote, it says, due to the fiscal responsibility Sumter County has shown in recent years, as well as continued growth due to residential and commercial construction. So, isn't the root problem Lake County has? It needs economic growth, and that's really what we should be focusing on instead of raising millage rate taxes.
Well, that's exactly what you want to see happen in a local economy. When the economy is strong, then number one, the burden gets spread among more taxpayers, and you can actually lower the burden that everyone has to share. And so that's exactly the scenario that we'd like to see in Lake County. And again, I go back to being opposed to this increase. That's why I don't want to see this increase, because you're essentially putting a damper on the opportunity for businesses to come to your county, for people to want to move to your county. And Sumter County has done a lot of really
Sumter County
good things.
It's leading the state. Those guys have really worked well together, and they're really focused on economic growth.
They are. They're very fiscally conservative, no question about it. I serve with several of them on the Lake and Sumter MPO board. I've seen them in action. They're very practical, and they don't get caught up in a lot of this emotional stuff that sometimes can lead you off on tangents and take your eye off of the ball, so to speak. And so I applaud them for what they're doing. You know, it's important to point out that their economy in some ways is very different because of the fact that they have such a large retirement community there, and the Villages is such a strong retirement community. But I think it goes to show that in Lake County, having the right mix, the right diversification, having retirees coming to Lake County, wanting to live in Lake County, we've been blessed in past years to be a place that retirees would want to come and retire to. And I think that we have to continue to market ourselves that way, because retirees are wonderful residents to have, but they don't appreciate it when you talk about millage increases, because they come to your area because they see certain things, and one of them is a predictable, affordable cost of living, and we're throwing a monkey wrench into that.
And one thing you got to give the Sumter County people credit for, they've made very tough, fiscally hard decisions when they really didn't have to. In other words, they saw an opportunity to save money, and they're still trying to save money. So they do a great job. Let's talk a little bit about impact fees. There's a lot of people who believe impact fees affect property taxes, and there's no effect on property taxes from impact fees. Why don't you take that for a moment and discuss with people the difference between the two funding mechanisms?
Well, yeah, I do think there's a lot of confusion, and I know that there's someone that writes about this a lot in the media, and I think that some of the things that have been written are a source of that confusion, quite frankly, because it sounds kind of good. You think, all right, this makes sense. Have somebody that's new pay a tax when they get here, and then that will take the burden off of us as the existing taxpayers. The problem is that, first of all, impact fees fund only infrastructure related to the fee that is charged. So, for example, school impact fee can only be used for bricks and mortar. That cannot go towards operating, that cannot go towards a county commission budget to help with the sheriff's salaries. It doesn't help any of those particular ongoing operating costs that we have. So what it can do is, if the impact fee is too high, it can kill new activity. New activity is so critical to having a healthy economy. And while you don't want, in my opinion, I don't want Lake County's economy to be driven by new home construction only, but we want to see a certain amount of that activity, whether it's new business construction or new home construction. You want to have a certain healthy level of that type of activity. Our economy is hurting so bad in North Lake County that any kind of activity like that is good activity.
But and the thing a lot of people don't realize, 90% or better of the jurisdictions in America have no impact fees. There are no impact fees virtually in Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, the Carolinas.
Well, you and I we got to have another show, talk about
Right.
impact fees, because there's a lot of things that, I mean, I'll have to say, Don, and I disagree with you probably on this. I am a proponent of a reasonable school impact fee. I think that that's important because we know we're dealing with the facts that we have. The facts that we have right now are that our school district doesn't have a funding mechanism for capital needs for new schools. So we've got to address that. I've got some ideas. I'm going to talk to the school board about them in September. But I think you need a reasonable fee. It's just you have to draw that line between what's reasonable and what's punitive.
But wouldn't have, I'll say this out loud, and I don't want to go on impact fees, but just like new cars set the price of used cars, new houses set the price of old houses. And if Lake County's not building new houses, and they cannot because of outrageous impact fees, people will remain 50 and 60% underwater. And that's the real risk you have with impact fees. You've got to have a vibrant economy to support it. And right now, I don't see it.
Yeah, there's a couple things that happen to the existing houses when your impact fees are too high on your new houses. It affects the marketability of those houses because your economy begins to stall. The other thing that happens is it hurts the affordability. You have more demand for the existing homes, and then what you see happens is that, like in apartments and rental housing, people get priced out of the market. And so when that starts to happen, your local economy will begin to collapse because people will not be able to afford to live in your area. And then you see things like taxes going up because you don't have enough people, really, helping with that
So
tax burden.
you don't have growth now.
Yeah, so there is a correlation. I'd say that the correlation is opposite of what people think it is.
Yeah, because it kills growth. A couple of big issues during this budget debate, and we sort of hit on this a little bit. Funding libraries and funding county employee raises, especially law enforcement people. I don't think there's anyone that's against libraries. I don't think there's anyone who's against properly and fairly compensating employees, especially law enforcement. But doesn't the real issue come down to the money or the lack of it? You have an electorate, a taxpayer group, that's not just seeing property tax bills go up. They're seeing medical insurance, all these other things go up, and they're being squeezed, and you guys are being squeezed. What's the answer? I just don't see how you can raise taxes on people who are suffering, and why are we at these loggerheads pinning blame against one another?
Well, I feel like I'm kind of harping on the same issue over and over again, but the reality is that when your economy is fragile, the last thing you want to do is increase the tax burden. But when it comes to spending and the levels of service, I'm a strong proponent as well of our local libraries. I think that in Lake County, in a lot of our rural areas, our libraries function as community centers, basically. They help with the identity of that community. There's a place where people can go and congregate. They serve a purpose, an educational purpose. So my goal would be you fund your libraries and you make that a priority, but you also have to do it extremely efficiently. You have to make sure that you're doing it the best possible way to do it, get the best value, and look at that new paradigm of what does a library really function as. It's not necessarily the way that it functioned in years past, and take a look at that and make sure that we've got the best model, so to speak. But again, I go back to the funding levels that we had last year. In order to continue those, we can do so without a tax increase. So then the question comes up about salaries. All right, maybe we need to be looking at some areas where we can cut some other things in order to be able to afford those salary increases, but you don't raise taxes in order to fund those salary.
I think the most stunning graph I've seen in the presentation from the county in June was from David Heath, that it's an ad valorem projection of growth of 4% for the next 10 years. So essentially they're saying if the economy were to grow 4%, you had 4% ad valorem growth for 10 years, the county at the current rate would still not have a flat budget, a balanced budget. Doesn't that really say with that type of growth, and God bless America if we can get 4% growth for the next 10 years. There's a lot of people who are concerned we're heading for another downturn, but doesn't that concern you that it's really a spending issue, like you've been saying, instead of a taxing issue?
Well, when I saw that slide, I had several problems with it, and I think that you've, well, pardon the pun, but hit the nail on the head. Being in the construction industry yourself, I mean, you're right on point there. That slide is problematic because, number one, it points to spending. Were we spending too much to begin with? And therefore, we would need that kind of growth for 10 years in a row in order to get to a point where we can spend that much money again. I also look at it from the standpoint of we made those reductions that were made in order to get the levels of service and the workforce on the county government side to where it needed to be. So we shouldn't be looking to go back to those levels of spending. We should be looking at ways to do it more efficiently, and I think that's the point that you make. But yeah, that's that.
And the most important thing, the county did get additional revenues this year. I got a quick question. I had an 80-year-old woman call me. We ran a column in the Daily Commercial. Every Wednesday and Friday there's a column around the house, and we talked about the property tax issue. An 80-year-old from Leesburg, a retiree, called me and said, Mr. Magruder, said, I don't understand the budget issues. I don't know what to say, but I feel like I want to say something because I can't afford it. She pointed out that her medicine's gone up, her insurance has gone up, her gas has gone up. Everything in her life has gone up, but yet her Social Security has remained the same. And she said, Mr. Magruder, what can I do? I feel like I want to come speak out and tell people my plight. And my response to her was, you're the best expert on you. Don't try to get in these budgets. You need to come and tell your story, because I do believe there's a disconnect with the people on the ground and the people on the commission. What say you?
Well, I think she needs to tell her story, because what we're reading in the newspaper is over and over again, someone keeps writing that this is an $88 impact per $100,000. It's a $109 impact. Actually, yeah, it's about $109 per $100,000. So we got a lot of misinformation swirling around out there.
But then there's also that $30,000, $40,000 impact on the business person.
That's right. The person that owns property that say this is their business is having rental property. They don't have any homestead exemptions.
No.
The businesses don't have any exemptions. So if their values went up and they get this millage increase, it's a huge hit. And so I just think it's so important that the county commission, this is the way I look at it. When we see that we could keep our levels intact as far as our essential government services go. I read an article this weekend. One of the commissioners said that I would be to blame if an ambulance broke down on the side of the road. I mean, this is absolutely ludicrous. I mean, it's ridiculous to make those kind of suggestions. In fact, I want to point out that our budget, without having a tax increase, we can fund 5 new ambulances this year, because we've set aside money from sales tax money that can be used for that infrastructure. So this is a real problem for these kind of things to be said in the community, and people think, oh yeah, but these are our essential services, we have to have this increase to fund them. No, we don't. What we have to do is step back and think from the standpoint of the taxpayers. Taxpayers can't afford to have this increase, whether it's someone on a fixed income or it's a business owner. Our economy as a whole can't afford to have this happen. And so at that point, it's an ideological decision. I'm going to find a way to make this work, to do what we need to do without putting an additional burden on our taxpayers. And I think that's where our disconnect is happening, is that there was a decision that they wanted to raise the taxes, and then they backed out of that and said, all right, let's make all of these good arguments, that we've got to have all of these things, we've got to spend all of this money in order to support this tax increase, instead of standing in the shoes of the taxpayers of Lake County and doing what was right by the taxpayers of Lake County.
Once again, I want to point out, we did ask Commissioner Jimmy Connor, we asked Commissioner Welton Cadwell, Commissioner Sean Parks, and Commissioner Tim Sullivan, would they like to participate with us today? They did not accept our invitation. We also want to point out that the meetings, the final 2 budget meetings where all this can be discussed, will be Tuesday, September 9th at 5:05 at the Round Courthouse in DeVaries, or September 23rd at 5:05, so it's at a time where people can attend. And once again, talk about your situation, talk about how it's going to affect you, and we encourage everyone to participate. It's a big deal, and I hope everyone does, but I want to switch gears. We only have a few minutes left. We got to talk about this trash thing, this garbage. October 6th, people in Lake County, the unincorporated areas, are going to have new garbage schedule. A couple of questions. The Heart of Florida Environmental Service in Sumter County is a trash dump. It's a beautiful name, but it's a trash dump. Why is Lake County stopping the use of a local incinerator with local jobs, which is considerably more environmentally friendly, which I thought was the gold standard, in favor of a trash dump in Lake County? And why are the citizens being taxed more for less service?
Well, this is one of those cases where you have me here today talking and answering these questions. I was against the program that was adopted. I've heard the arguments that they've made in favor of it. I don't think that there's any basis for making a decision to go with a landfill when we had an opportunity to continue using the incinerator. And we had an opportunity to work with Covanta on a new program that they actually put out that would have been essentially 100% recycling, because you would have received the same pickup schedule we have now with twice-a-week pickup. They would have taken the trash there to Covanta, where they were going to actually build a state-of-the-art facility to do the sorting of the recyclable material so that they could sell that, make money off of that, and then burn the rest of the trash, make electricity, and then keep Lake County residents, and I know there's several Sumter County residents that work there at Covanta, but my board would not even consider that as an alternative. I do not understand it. I have never understood it. I have spoken out very strongly against it. And it, you know what, it comes full circle to this budget that we're working on right now. And I know we want to talk about the changes and the specifics and how they affect our residents, but I want to point out that there is a huge budgetary impact of this new program, because it was sold as something that would save money. It is just, that is simply not the case. The disposal cost goes down when you use this landfill in Sumter County. The problem is that landfill is charging half the rate of what the going rate is average-wise across the state of Florida for a landfill. That tells me something. That's a huge red flag to me.
That's bait and switch.
That's right. Is that a sustainable rate? And there is a contract provision that allows them to increase that rate if they find out that they need to in order to meet all of their regulatory requirements at that landfill. So I say, you know, we're going to see that probably go up in the future.
And I'm told Lake County doesn't even have a firm contract.
Well, I can't speak to that, but I can tell you that Covanta has since gone out and negotiated with many cities around the area. From what I understand, the rate is about $27 a ton. That we could have been. We could have negotiated to have a rate like that We also could have taken advantage of their new program for recycling, and we could have kept our pickup twice a week.
And
so that's going to be a real burden on people. I've gotten calls from people that are getting their new trash cans, and they're excited. They like the new trash cans. They like the way they look, but they're asking me about this only once a week pickup, and they had no idea that we were going to have that
Well, there's a couple of things on the pickup. There's only going to be one person on the truck, and they're going to use a mechanical system, I'm told. And most of the county, except for certain HOAs in South Lake County, are getting once a week pickup. Now, I've got two questions. First off, you're not going to be able to put an extra bag. Say if you have a party or something at your house and you need to have extra trash, you can't put an extra bag. They won't pick it up. And then why is it? It seems to me fundamentally unfair that certain people in the county, certain HOAs in certain areas of the county are getting twice a week pickup, and someone in North Lady Lake or North Umatilla is getting 1 week. How do you explain that?
Right, and I understand that the idea was to give those neighborhoods the opportunity to vote, to pay more, to have twice a week pickup. And good for them that they were able to take advantage of that. But when you talk about fairness, I happen to be in an area where we didn't have the opportunity to make that choice. It is fundamentally unfair, and it is an inherent problem with the program itself, and it was done at the end of the process after the contracts were awarded. This was a decision that was made to try to make it more palatable to the public, and but it does go to show that because they're charging more for that twice a week pickup, this is what would happen if they had kept us on. Right. I mean, it just, none of it makes sense.
Well, here's the thing that really doesn't make sense. All right. The county website, now we're talking about Lake County, on its website says that the average person per household generates 4.57 pounds of trash every day. That means in 1 week, a regular family of four would generate 128 pounds of trash. If the maximum trash can is 50 pounds, and at best 30 pounds for a recycle bin, which most everyone has, based on the calculations, what does a homeowner do with the other 48 pounds of trash they're going to generate?
Well, the theory is that they would then ask for a larger recycling bin and they would recycle more. That's the theory behind this, and that by recycling more, then the county would have a reduction in the collection cost, because the companies that are doing the collection have indicated that then they would lower the cost if the recycling went up. It's strictly theory, and during the time of negotiating and looking at these, we never negotiated. We just, an RFP went out. I complained about the RFP and asked that we go back to the drawing table. That wasn't done. It was sent out. Then we got the proposals back.
I hate to say it, it's almost like the fix was in.
Well, it reminds me of a lot of Obamacare. You have to pass it to find out what's in it. And then what we found out, there were a lot of things that were tacked on at the end to try to make it more palatable to the public. But there are a lot of people in Lake County that are going to be on the short end of the stick. And I'm just really aggravated because it was sold as something that was going to save money. The reality is that our assessments, while we have 3 districts, 2 districts came down just negligible, all right? But we're getting half of the service.
Half of the service, yeah.
Right.
Well, the other thing that concerns me, and I'm a practical person, I drive down a road in which there's a dirt road, and people have to bring their cans to the end of the dirt road. And I'm thinking about someone trying to lug that garbage can down there. They're not going to be able to put a trash bag out. God help if you get a wind and blow it over and you got one guy in the truck who can't get out of the truck and won't pick it up. If you miss your pickup day, you're going to be another week getting trash picked up. This is just fraught with all kind of problems. Did these people not look at the practical things that are going to happen to their constituents?
Well, it's aggravating again because I spend a lot of time in details, and I know that's sometimes that's hard to convey to the public because everyone wants to hear a very simple and short explanation. But the details of this thing are very telling. And I think that what transpired was that there was a decision made internally that this was where we were going to go, where the county government was going to go as far as the trash program. But as far as truly vetting it and having a full-blown discussion and dialogue at the county commission level, I felt like we never truly had that opportunity because there was a predisposition, number one, against Covanta, just because of the long history of Covanta. And sure, there's some bad history there, but we're way past that. We're at a point now where we're talking about the consumers of Lake County today in 2014 and who can provide the best service and the safest service and the most environmentally sound service.
That's right, and recycling is the gold standard. One other thing, Leslie, I understand you can buy an extra can for $60. Someone can buy a can, and then you can pay $20 to $40 more a year to get it hauled. And then you have to put the can out at a certain time. And plus, I guess the county's paying for all these cans one way or another. But that's one thing I didn't understand. Before, the county was buying no cans. Now they're buying thousands and thousands of cans technically.
Right, and you said that it was tied to having these automated trucks, but the reality is that the neighborhoods that might opt for the twice-a-week service, they might be able to use the automated trucks because of the type of neighborhoods they are. But in a lot of the areas of unincorporated Lake County, they will not be able to use the automated trucks. So having the expensive big trash cans and so forth, you're really going to have another person on the truck, which adds to the overall collection price. I mean, I had calculated that we could have saved $1 million if we had just left the collection the way that it had been. It
seems to me that the whole trash thing was set up for the benefit of the hauler and the dump people in the county, and little attention.
The consumer was left behind on this one, and I am just hoping that come October, as this starts to go into effect, that it can be tweaked and changed, and maybe ultimately we can get back on the right track with regard to trash collection. But Don, I want to point something out about the budget and the solid waste program. There's about $3.7 million in the solid waste reserves. That money came from the general fund. It was part of the way that solid waste had been funded in the past. And this budget cycle is pulling $3.1 million out of that solid waste reserve to pay for the operation of the solid waste program. Another $300,000 is coming out of the general fund to help pay for our convenience centers and drop-off locations, which those are important, but this $3.1 million, why aren't we having a serious discussion about how we can trim that down? I've raised that. Apparently we're going to talk about it a little bit tomorrow at the board meeting. But again, that's the kind of thing that should have been discussed at the time that we were looking at the program as a whole, instead of waiting until this late date.
Well, Commissioner Campione, thank you for being with us today. You covered a lot of great information on property taxes. I want to encourage our listeners, please go out to the September 9th and 23rd meeting at the county courthouse at 5:05. The property tax issue is a big deal. And Commissioner Campione, thank you for being here, and join us every Monday from noon to 1 around the house. And be sure to catch us Fridays in the Daily Commercial and Around the House, the column. Until next week, we'll see you around the house.